Hi, this is Tom. In today's episode, we're going to rationalize the square root of 3 divided by the square root of 3 minus the square root of x. And the key to doing this is to multiply the denominator by its conjugate. And that sounds like a big word, but here's what it is. Conjugate of a binomial is found by changing the sign of the second term. Oops. For example, if you have x plus 2, then its conjugate is going to be x minus 2. Notice I didn't write an equal sign there because they're not the same thing. If you have something like x plus the square root of 3, then it has a conjugate of x minus the square root of 3. And the reason for finding the conjugate is that if you take a number, like a binomial, and you multiply it by its conjugate, it forms a difference of squares. And the middle terms will drop out, and all you'll have left then will just be a simple number. So, with that in mind, let's begin to rationalize the problem at hand. And it says we're going to take the square root of 3, we're going to divide it by the square root of 3 minus the square root of x. I'm going to multiply that by its conjugate. Now, when we do that, that's going to be the square root of 3 plus square root of x. Now, you can't just multiply the bottom. You also need to do the same thing to the top. So we multiply it with the top also by the square root of 3 plus the square root of square root of x. So we're going to have to do some distributing here, and we'll do that. Just like this. So here's what we have. In the numerator, we're going to have the square root of 3 times the square root of 3. So I'll write that out. Even if you've already figured that out, that's okay. The square root of 3 times the square root of 3. And then we're going to have to distribute the square root of 3 times the square root of x. So plus square root of 3 times the square root of x. Now, in the denominator, we're going to have to distribute all this. And I'm going to do that, but as you get more comfortable with the idea, you'll realize that the middle term always drops out. So you really don't even need to bother with it. But just to illustrate, let's go through this process together. So, to begin with, we're going to take the square root of 3, and we're going to distribute it to the square root of 3 and the square root of x. So this is going to give me, let's see, a square root of 3 times the square root of 3 plus square root of 3 times the square root of x. And then let's do the next piece in blue. That's going to be a square root of minus the root x times square root of 3 and minus root x times square root of x. So when I do that, I have a minus, and the order of these can be either one, but minus square root of x times the square root of 3. Then I'm going to have minus square root of x times the square root of x. Now we can simplify what we have. So when we do that, in the numerator, I have a square root of 3 times the square root of 3. That's going to give me the square root of 9 plus the square root of 3 times the square root of x. That's going to give me the square root of 3x. Divide all of that by the square root of 3 times the square root of 3. That's going to be the square root of 9 plus square root of 3 times the square root of x, that's going to be the square root of 3x. And then I'm going to do that again. I have minus the square root of x times the square root of 3. That's going to be a minus square root 3x. Minus the square root of x times the square root of x. That's going to give me the square root of x squared. And that's my denominator. Now, let's simplify what we have. When we do that, we have the square root of 9. Oops. We have the square root of 9, which is 3. So I have 3 plus the radical or square root of 3x can't be simplified. So the best we can do is just leave it as the square root of 3x. I'm going to leave over the square root of 9. That's going to be a 3. And then a plus root 3x minus root 3x. Well, those cancel. Those are opposites. And so they just equal 0. If I take the square root of x squared, that's simply x. So minus x. And notice that you can't cancel these 3's. You can only cancel things when everything is written in terms of multiplication. And so, that's it. We're done. And thank you for joining me.